I just had a baby. I expect a $5,000 baby shower gift from you. This outrageous message came from Jessica, the detestable being who stole Michael from me. She had lied about being pregnant to steal him away, leading to our divorce. Even though I've tried to forget that day since remarrying, her presence still disrupts my peace. She hasn't changed, still stirring up trouble without a care. I can hardly believe she's my real sister. But now that this message has arrived and been seen by John, ignoring it isn't an option. Affectionately, I agreed to attend the celebration since John suggested we go. John seems to have a plan. He's a warm and kind person, but hates dishonesty. He's smart and skilled at turning work situations to his advantage, so I trust he has a strategy in mind. She can laugh about it now, but soon she'll have to face the music for all her wrongdoings. Johnson, I've been working as an office assistant in a local company since I graduated from college. I've been dating someone since my college days. Back then, through our club activities, I met Michael Smith, a medical student at the same university. His dad is a renowned allergy specialist, so it seems Michael is aiming to become a doctor too. His father's clinic is super popular, with patients from all over the country seeking treatment there. Being the only son of a solo practitioner and heir to a well-known clinic, my first impression was that he was a smart, well-off guy. But that was just my bias, apparently. Talking to him, I found he was quite unique, and we both liked the same film director's work. I wanted to get to know him better, so I made the first move. Hey, have you seen the new movie by that director? If not, want to go see it together? Ex a woman who likes those films? That's a bit surprising. Absolutely. Really. I don't have many fans in my circle. I'm so glad I can watch it with you. It's my efforts paid off, and he began to see me as someone special. Our relationship continued not just through college, but afterwards too, and Michael proposed to me when I was 25. I'm still learning to be a doctor, but in the future, I want to take over my dad's clinic and be a great doctor. I want you, and Naomi, to be there to see it all. Will you marry me? Of course, I'd be delighted. Let's have a happy life together. I was on top of the world, pregnant right after getting married. Michael would definitely be a great dad. Boy or girl, as long as the baby was healthy, that was after getting married. Michael was probably just as excited for the birth. But then my happiness shattered. I suffered from severe morning sickness, constantly battling nausea and feeling unwell. I couldn't keep up with my job post-college and had to resign. Fighting my morning sickness at home. I had to eat constantly due to morning sickness, needing to constantly eat to stave off the nausea. Surrounded by empty pastry bags where I always sat. And foam. Naomi, what's happened to this place? It's a mess with all these snacks and bread bags. Sorry. I've been too sick to clean up. You're not working and you've put on so much weight. It's hard without eating. I was always eating because of my morning sickness. But despite being early in my pregnancy, I had gained 22 pounds compared to before. Out doing housework and just eating. You're like a pig who's given up on being ladylike. That's harsh. Bothering me? Well, Michael's been coming home late lately. He's a doctor, so it's unavoidable, but he seems to be at the hospital all the time, even on weekends. We hardly have time to talk these days. I see. Well, it's no surprise considering someone like you claims to be a doctor's wife. I felt a chill at Jessica's icy smile. What? I came to talk to you today. As she said this, Jessica glanced toward the living room door. Then entering from the living room door was Michael. Michael, did you get off work early from the hospital today? I need to talk to you. Let's get a divorce. What kind of joke is this? What do you mean? As soon as I got back, I couldn't understand what Michael was saying at all. I knew he wasn't the type to make such a terrible joke at a time like this, especially since we had been together since college, and I was carrying his child. See, your beloved husband is saying this. You should listen to his request and let go quickly. What? Jessica? Michael looked at me awkwardly. I can't see you as a woman anymore after you kept eating and gaining weight. But this is morning sickness. I feel sick if I don't eat. Jessica looked triumphantly at me. That's the way it is. And the baby in your belly being a girl. She won't be the heir to the Smith Clinic. But in my belly, I carry Michael's child, a suitable heir. Jessica, I felt a sinking feeling as I watched Jessica lovingly stroke her belly. I'm 3 months pregnant, and it's a boy, according to the tests. You can't be serious. Michael, what are you doing while I'm going through all this pain? That's why all your excuses, quitting your job, and just eating all the time are unacceptable. I'm tired of watching you lying around, constantly eating snacks. I take care of myself, so I don't have morning sickness. Even when pregnant, I won't lose my self-control and eat like a pig, unlike you. I was at a loss for words, seeing Jessica's smug face and Michael looking down at the floor, guilt-ridden. Jessica being pregnant with a boy. I didn't know. But as an heir, I want a son. I prefer a beautiful wife like Jessica over a woman who keeps gaining weight without restraint. That's just wanting an heir and a beautiful wife is your own selfish desire, isn't it? I'll pay alimony, so let's part without any fuss. Seeing Michael apologizing, I knew that things could never go back to how they were. After that, Michael and I divorced, and I gave birth to our daughter as a single mother. His promise of alimony turned out to be just words, with no actual payment. Not knowing what else to do, I took a job at a nearby department store that was hiring. Life is unpredictable. My hard work and character caught the attention of someone. It was John Johnson, a well-regarded manager in the external sales department. Great to see. You're always working hard. Thanks. I'm about to finish up soon. Are you done for the day? John? Yeah. Oh, there's this great Italian place nearby. I want you to try. Naomi. And this, it's a little gift for your daughter. It was through light conversations every time we met. We were drawn to each other and began dating, which led to our remarriage. Naomi, actually 20 easier, I might be a guy 20 years older than you, but I sincerely want to make you and your daughter happy. Will you marry me? Are you sure about me? I'd be delighted. Life after remarriage was truly blissful. A gentle husband, my daughter and I lived a peaceful life. However, I failed to notice the ominous footsteps creeping closer to our tranquil days. One day, John had work, but I was off. Just as I thought of having a leisurely tea, an email arrived. It was from Jessica, and the content was shocking. A baby is born. I'm expecting a $5,000 baby shower gift. A sigh escaped me in front of that curt email. 5 years ago, Jessica had an affair with Michael and snatched him away. Now this, and $5,000 for a baby shower gift seemed too much. I can't forget that day, nor can I even if I tried. Expressions on Jessica and Michael's faces back then. That to the way they sought happiness together, ignoring my suffering from morning sickness, was unforgivable. I was at a loss on how to respond to Jessica's email. Then John returned from work, noticing something was off, and asked with concern, "What's wrong? Naomi? You look pale." "Oh, dear John. It's a message from my sister. She had a baby. The sister who married your ex-husband." "Michael?" "Yeah. I don't want to see her face or hear from her. Plus, she's asking for a $5,000 baby shower gift." As John listened and looked at my phone, he suddenly said, "Wait, this Jessica Smith name. You know her. I didn't mention her when we got married because I didn't want to remember. I've never been introduced to her by you, but I wonder." John, pondering while looking at the email, seemed to recall something. "But we didn't properly greet her during our wedding, so let's visit her now. Also, I just remembered something I needed to do back at the department store. Going back to the department store now. Sorry, there's something I need to do." A few hours later, John returned with the thick file. "Is it okay if we visit your sister Jessica 2 weeks from now on Sunday? We both have the day off, and I'd like her to meet my parents and cousins too." "Their parents and cousins too? I heard your ex-husband Michael is famous for allergy treatment. My family has a history of allergies. We thought we might get some good advice." Except people, I remembered hearing from friends that Michael had taken over his father's allergy clinic. Michael's dad was an authority on allergy treatment, and Michael became an allergist too, a friend told me. "Okay, I'll contact Jessica." Jessica quickly agreed when I contacted her. "I want to see the baby and will bring a gift. Can I bring some relatives too? They really want to meet you." "Of course, the more guests, the more gifts. Looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks on Sunday." 2 weeks later, on Sunday, I visited Jessica's house with John, his parents, and relatives including his cousins. He's in a quiet residential area. Her stylish house stood next to the clinic, its white walls gleaming. John's parents and relatives were surprised by its luxurious design, excited to meet the renowned allergist. "Welcome. I've been waiting for you. Long time no see. Jessica, you look happy." Of course. I was worried about my first childbirth, but it all worked out in the end. I felt something off in Jessica's words. "First childbirth. Didn't you say you were pregnant with a boy before?" "Oh, did I not tell you I miscarried that time? So this is my first." "Hey, we aren't rich, and we don't have to give Jessica the $5,000 she asked for." But John, unfazed, cut me off. "It's fine. Trust me. You'll understand if you watch." "What do you mean, if I watch?" "Well, we were talking about the envelope." Jessica had already started opening it. "I need to check if it's exactly $5,000. Just with this thickness, it might even be $10,000. The cute envelope was torn open with a ripping sound. Jessica's face clouded over the moment she opened it. "What's this?" John stepped forward with a salesperson's smile to explain. "Mrs. Jessica Smith, this is a detailed statement of your purchases at the department store over the past 5 years. You said to put it on my tab, and this is the amount you've accumulated to date." The statement Jessica held listed names of luxury watches and brand bags. Seeing the 5-digit figure in the amount column, I was in disbelief. Indeed, Mr. Michael Smith himself and his parents are valued customers with an external sales card contract. However, with such a high amount, we needed to confirm just to be sure. My husband is the famous allergist Michael Smith. As the wife of the clinic's director, using 1 or 2 external sales cards is nothing. Is that so? Also, there's something else I personally wanted to verify. John paused before continuing. About 5 years ago, we had complaints about a customer flaunting their external sales card and making extremely unpleasant remarks. Do you know anything about this? What's that? What does it matter? Since we had several complaints, I checked with the staff who were nearby at the time. The content of the conversation was so terrible that the staff remembered it clearly. Glancing sideways, I saw Jessica's expression harden. The staff said the conversation was about stealing someone's husband, who happens to be her brother-in-law. Could it be? Yes, that's right. And she bragged about using a fake pregnancy to break them up. Laughing loudly, she talked about how she lied about miscarrying, like it was some kind of heroic tale. That's when I realized, miscarrying, like it was some kind of heroic tale. At the time, Jessica's claim of being pregnant with a boy, the heir, was all a lie to snatch Michael. Of course, there was no pregnancy, so no morning sickness or changes in her body shape. What? Are you saying that story was about me? Matching the complaints with the external sales card, your name, Jessica Smith, came up. I can't believe this. You're marrying into a doctor's family, becoming the clinic director's wife. I couldn't stand it. I had to do whatever it took to tell Michael that I was the right one for him. I was overwhelmed with disbelief, that Michael had fallen for Jessica's scheme and she had lied to marry him. Well, I was stunned. The door opened. "What's this all about? Explain yourself." "Jessica, since when have you been here?" "From the beginning. I came back to get something I forgot and found the external sales card statement. And now I hear the pregnancy 5 years ago was all a lie. You trapped me," Michael shouted, and Jessica began to laugh. "So what? You got a beautiful wife, and we have a child now. So it's fine, right? Don't joke with me. I can't live with a liar like you. Let's get a divorce." "You can't be serious. What about our child? Don't you feel sorry for them, pushing her away?" Michael glared at Jessica with a furious expression. "I can't live with a liar and reckless spender like you. It's not good for the child either. We're getting a divorce. I'm taking custody." "Are you kidding me? Do you have any idea what I went through to give birth to this child? This child needs to become a doctor in the future to support us. But you're just thinking about yourself. There's no point in talking about this now. Let's handle the rest through a lawyer." Asked the relatives who came along, hoping to get some effective medicine from the famous allergist, were frozen in shock at this chaotic scene. I was so embarrassed to admit that she was my sister. Afterward, Michael got a good lawyer specializing in divorce and successfully got divorced and won custody. Meanwhile, Jessica, who had been shopping to her heart's content on credit using the external sales card during her marriage, was now being chased for repayments. "Hey, if your husband hadn't brought that statement, I'd still be the clinic director's wife. I'm being hounded for repayments now. Help your sister out in a pinch, will you? Why should I? You brought this on yourself, didn't you? And you should pay for your own shopping." Unexpectedly, I got a message from Michael via social media. "Hey, can we start over?" If Jessica hadn't lied about having a boy 5 years ago, we would have been fine as a couple. "I want to see our daughter too. I haven't forgotten how you left me suffering with morning sickness and mocked me, then cheated on me. After 5 years of no contact, the last thing I wanted was to see his face again." Michael seemed to be struggling to keep the clinic he inherited from his father running, but you can't stop gossip. To avid people such peace. Due to the infidelity rumors, patients stopped coming. The Smith Clinic, which Michael inherited, had a 1-star rating and unbelievable bad reviews on a hospital review site. It seemed only a matter of time before he would have to close the clinic he was so fixated on inheriting. Ironically, he was so obsessed with having a male heir, my husband, daughter, and I continued to live happily as a family. "Naomi, are you ready? Shall we head out soon?" "Yes. I was just remembering how delicious the spaghetti you brought me from that restaurant was. Back when I was a single mother, John used to order from a restaurant for takeout as a way to approach me. Back then, my daughter was small, and since we weren't dating, we never ate at the restaurant, just as colleagues. You had just gotten divorced and were having a hard time, right? I thought even a little bit of delicious food could bring you happiness. It was your kindness that drew me to you. way, the dish that brought us together. Back then, it was just my daughter and me eating takeout, but now it's different. I'm happy that we can eat together as a family. Who would have thought that a day like this, going out with you and our daughter, would come? This is the end for you. What are you doing? Open this door, please. And what do you mean by the end? I just turned off the breaker downstairs. Now the elevator won't work. You can't get down from the second floor. What are you talking about? I'm heading out on a 7-night, 8-day trip with my friends. The fake mom can starve on the second floor. Hey, stop joking and open the door. I could open it, but you can't get down to the first floor by yourself. Your smartphone and computer are downstairs, so you can't call for help. Ed's on a business trip and won't be back for 3 months. The situation looks pretty hopeless. My husband's daughter, Emily, really left me, a wheelchair user stranded on the second floor, and went on her trip. This was crossing a line. A week later, when Emily returned home, she felt something was off. As she climbed the stairs, "Why are you looking so chipper?" It seemed Emily couldn't grasp the situation, so I decided to explain it to her. This would probably be my last lesson to her as a mother, so I took my time explaining carefully. My name is Jennifer. I'm a 34-year-old programmer, just a regular person in her 40s with a job, a marriage, and kids. But there's one thing that sets me apart. I've been wheelchair-bound since a traffic accident in middle school. When the accident happened, I was unconscious for 3 days and bedridden for treatment after waking up. I didn't realize for a while that my legs had stopped working. I only knew my legs were paralyzed when my mom broke the news to me. When will I start rehab? I want to play basketball again soon. If I take it easy, I might lose my spot on the team. I think the doctor will have something to say, but the truth is I cried all day after hearing the cruel reality from my mom. It must have been hard for her to tell me. She cried with me all day. That my tomboyish, mischievous, and lively nature helped me bounce back quickly. Well, what's done is done. What matters is what comes next. This life in a wheelchair was inconvenient, but not as bad as I had imagined. Just over 20 years have passed since the accident, and they've adapted so well to wheelchair life that it surprises people. I still have some upper body strength, so I can manage the bathroom alone if I try. I chose a company understanding of my wheelchair needs and now mainly work from home. I go to the office about 2 or 3 times a month for meetings, commuting by car. I drive myself. I use a specially adapted vehicle that can be operated solely with my hands, and sometimes I go for drives on weekends. I enjoyed wheelchair basketball in my 20s. There have been challenges, but overall, I'm satisfied with my life. I even managed to get married, something I had given up on because of my disability. Does this setup work for you? Your parents' house seemed more elaborate. That was just my parents going overboard because they weren't sure what I needed. This is enough for me. We just need to install a lift for the stairs. I can't install a lift myself. Guess we'll have to wait for the professionals. I married Kevin, who's 7 years older, just last year. Our meeting wasn't dramatic, just a typical workplace romance. After getting married, Kevin and I rented a house and made it wheelchair accessible with permission. Wheelchair accessible meant simple things like installing portable ramps and handrails. The only major addition was a rail lift for getting to the second floor. And that's how our sweet newlywed life began, or at least, that's what we thought. And boom! Jennifer, what's for dinner? But weren't you with your mom today? Didn't you eat anything there? She said she had some errand and left early. Oh dear. You should told me if you needed dinner. I always say that, don't I? Sorry about that. My husband Kevin is a divorcee with a child. But his daughter Emily is already an 18-year-old college student. I've known her since before we got married, and we have a good relationship. She calls me Jennifer. Emily also gets along well with Kevin's ex-wife. He's in meeting her sometimes and distinguishing her as mom. Despite potential issues like my disability or the dynamics with Emily, I felt joy that our family life started without any trouble. But unbeknownst to me, seeds of trouble were growing behind the scenes. It's a year into our marriage. Emily, who had been friendly, became increasingly distant, now barely conversing. Welcome back. Do you want dinner? No, I don't. Upon returning home, Emily would go straight to her room on the second floor, hardly coming out. It's hard for me to go upstairs without the lift, so my life is centered around the first floor. I only go upstairs about once a month to retrieve clothes or items from the storage room. For Emily avoiding me, the second floor is a convenient refuge. I have no idea why my daughter has become distant towards me. I've even discussed this with my husband. Did I do something to make Emily dislike me? You can't think of anything, right? We were so close before, even when we first moved into this house. She talks to me just like she always has. Why this sudden change? It wasn't sudden. It started about a month after moving in here. Hubby living with me made her upset. Probably not. She's known about your disability since before we married. Kevin and I were at a loss, not understanding why Emily's attitude changed. Not knowing the cause, we couldn't solve it, so I tried talking to her, but it seems that wasn't the best approach. Oh, you're home early today. I only had 2 classes. Wait a moment. I stopped Emily as she was about to go upstairs. What? But Emily turned to me with a face somewhere between anger and no expression. I couldn't tell her feelings, but her annoyance was clear. We haven't talked much lately. Is something going on at college? Or is it something to do with me? If you're troubled, you can tell me anything. Don't act like a mom. It's annoying. Emily mumbled and went upstairs. I thought I must have misheard. It was hard to believe she would say something so cruel. I convinced myself it was a misunderstanding, trying to ease the shock. That night, I discovered the reason behind Emily's coldness and reported to Kevin. It seems I'm the cause. She said, "Don't act like a mom. It's annoying." What? Emily said that? Kevin was furious, leading to a family meeting. After hearing my side of the story, my husband loudly called for our daughter from the bottom of the stairs. Summoned by her father, she came to the living room with a sulky expression and sat down. Emily, I heard you said something awful to Jennifer. Why would you say that? Jennifer, she's not my mom. She's just a fake mom to me. Isn't this how you treat a fake mom? How can you say that? Kevin, please don't yell right away. Better if my husband lost his temper here, we wouldn't be able to hear our daughter's side and resolve the issue. Suppressing the shock of being called a fake mother, I urged my husband to stay calm. Kevin regained composure and continued. Why'd you suddenly start saying that? You never used to. When I thought about it, it's weird. Dad divorced Mom and remarried within a year. You must have been cheating with Jennifer while still married, right? Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. I've known Jennifer for over 10 years. We worked together. That's why we got married quickly. And about cheating. Dad was always busy with work, leaving Mom lonely. Maybe the divorce was partly your fault too, Dad. Emily, Kevin's a busy software engineer. His work is for the family. Shut up! It's all your fault. You ruined our lives. My daughter slammed the table with a bang, stood up quickly, and left the living room. Oh, I don't understand why she would think such a thing, but it seems she believes I stole her father from his ex-wife. I think I kind of understand the reason now. Let's leave it at that for today, but Emily seems to be misunderstanding something. So Jennifer, just keep your distance from Emily for now. I'll clear up her misunderstanding. I decided to trust my husband's words and leave it to him. However, despite his attempts to clear up our daughter's misunderstanding, she was no longer willing to listen. Why are you so cold to your mom? How long are you gonna stick with that fake mom? Just get a divorce already. What do you dislike so much? It's her very existence, the fake mom. And when my husband talked to our daughter, she would confront me when he wasn't looking. You told Dad to talk to me again, didn't you? Don't get too comfortable just because you have him on your side. That's not true. How can I believe anything from you, who stole Dad from Mom? My daughter kicked the laundry I had folded. But with my mobility issues, it was a struggle to pick up the clothes that were kicked out of my reach. Knowing this, she deliberately kicked the pile from the bottom to make the clothes fly further. Watching the scattered laundry, she seemed satisfied and went upstairs, while I picked up what I could reach. My husband would scold our daughter, who would then take it out on me. This pattern has become the routine. But to resolve my daughter's misunderstanding, we needed to keep talking, so this cycle would likely continue. However, just when I was preparing to keep dealing with my daughter patiently, my husband's long business trip was unfortunately scheduled. I'm sorry to leave you two alone while this is still unresolved. It's work, so it can't be helped. Maybe the company thinks it's okay because I'm too tough. Maybe I should be the one apologizing to you. It's okay if resolving things with Emily gets pushed back 2 or 3 months. I sent my husband off with a smile, not wanting to worry him more than necessary. Honestly, I felt uneasy about being alone with my daughter for 3 months. But there hadn't been any physical violence, so I shouldn't be overly anxious. That's what I thought, but my daughter's behavior escalated quickly once my husband was out of the house. 3 days after he left for his business trip. Why is the picnic blanket here? Maybe Emily was using it, but she seemed to have left earlier. I decided it was okay to tidy up the picnic blanket and took it to the storage room upstairs. As I went upstairs, I heard the front door open. Is Emily back already? Worries about my daughter, but continuing to the storage room. I placed the picnic blanket inside. Suddenly, the door to the storage room slammed shut. This is the end for you. What are you doing? Open this door. It seemed I had fallen into my daughter's trap. She was holding the door from the outside, and I couldn't budge it from my wheelchair. However, the storage room door didn't have a lock. She couldn't keep holding it forever, so what did she mean by the end for me? Do you want me to open it? I'll open it soon, but first, just listen to me. I don't want to see your face, and you move surprisingly quickly for someone in a wheelchair. So she locked me in the storage room to avoid any retaliation from me. Indeed, being physically trained in basketball, I could understand her caution. But apart from that, her decision wasn't very wise. Do you think I'm going to hit you? And what do you mean by the end? Actions. Now, the elevator won't work, and you can't get down from the second floor. What? What are you talking about? I'm going on a 7-night, 8-day trip with my friends, so I'll help you in a week. Starve on the second floor, fake mom. Hey, stop joking. Open the door. I could open it, but you can't get down to the first floor alone. Your smartphone and computer are downstairs, so you can't call for help, and Dad's on a business trip and won't be back for 3 months. The situation looks pretty hopeless. Why are you doing something so terrible? Because you stole Dad from Mom. Us to get a divorce already. Then Mom can remarry Dad. She even broke up with her boyfriend, thinking Dad would come back to her. To come back to her if she knew about Mom's feelings. Kevin would never remarry Mindy. Because, what do you know? Good luck surviving. That's the sound of hurried footsteps faded away. Emily must have run out of the house, and when I opened the door of the storage room, no one was there. I stepped into the hallway and headed towards the stairs. Passing by Emily's room, atop this, I noticed a board about 8 inches high fixed at the bottom of her door. It's made so the door can be opened, but I can't enter the room in my wheelchair. Emily had found a clever way to trap me on the second floor while also maintaining her privacy. Reaching the stairs, I found a few pieces of bread and a bottle of water on the floor. Quickly a precaution to ensure I didn't starve to death. However, while I could drink tap water for hydration, the bread was clearly not enough for a week. Her intent to starve me seemed serious. This has crossed a line. I resolved to teach Emily and whoever orchestrated this situation a harsh lesson. A week later, Emily returned from her trip. I secretly observed her taking off her shoes at the entrance, hiding at the back of the room. She stepped into the house and started looking around, sensing something different about the house today. The stair lift was on the first floor, and there were unusual shoes at the entrance. However, my daughter, seemingly oblivious to this, felt something was off but couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Actually, as usual, she quickly went upstairs without realizing the exact cause of her unease. I followed her, and halfway up the stairs, I heard her loud voice. "Why are you here?" "Shall I explain?" "How come you're looking so well?" Perhaps Emily was surprised to see me peeking from the storage room, and even more startled when I spoke from behind her. My daughter, in a state of constant surprise and confusion, widened her eyes and stared at me, desperately trying to make sense of the situation. "You're not starving at all." "Of course, I'm not. You might have thought you trapped me on the second floor, but that wasn't really a trap." "But wasn't the stair lift supposed to be unusable?" "The lift is battery powered, so it works even when the breaker is off. It's a standard feature for power outage situations." "Then?" "Yes, right after you left for your trip. I went downstairs using the lift. Even if it hadn't worked, I could have asked for help from a window. As for the breaker, I usually use a stick to reset it, so no issues there. And thanks for the bread, by the way. It made a nice snap." Emily had grown cold towards me about a month after moving in. Because she reduced her interactions with me early on, she never fully understood the extent of my mobility limitations. Even after living together for a year, she didn't fully grasp how the stair lift worked. Right after she left for her trip, I went downstairs as usual and immediately called Kevin to report what had happened. When Emily learned that I wasn't starving, she quickly looked towards the storage room and pointed to a person sitting there in Caesar, shouting, "Why is Mom here? And why is she sitting like that? What are you up to?" "I'll explain that. My husband had been standing right next to the storage room door all this time, but Emily was too shocked by the sight of her mother and me to notice him. So she yelled out in surprise again, 'Dad, why are you here? Aren't you on a business trip?' "Huh, it's not an overseas trip. It's Sunday, and I'm off work, so it's not strange for me to be home," he replied. Emily's naive question seemed to perplex my husband. At 19, and with only part-time job experience, she had assumed that long-term business trip meant he couldn't come home often. However, his business trip was just a 3-hour drive away, and he planned to return home every 2 weeks. Today, a bit earlier than scheduled, he came back due to the situation with Emily. "I heard from your mother about the nonsense you've been up to and telling me to divorce." "Yes, it's all because of this fake mom. If she wasn't here, Mom and Dad could remarry. I'm never getting a divorce, and I won't remarry Mindy." "Why not? The reason for the divorce might be Mom's affair, but wasn't it also because you were always working? Besides, Mom can't forget you. She's repented and left her affair partner waiting for you." Hearing Emily's words, my husband and I sighed. Mindy, unable to bear the tension, her head bowed, staring at the floor. Mindy, explain it yourself. That's why I brought you here. Yes. The affair was not because of your work. It was just me enjoying playing around with men. Mindy confessed. Lies, right? You said the affair was because of Dad's work. But you left the other man because you couldn't forget Dad. It's not like that. I was dumped again because of my infidelity. I've always had a low income from part-time jobs. Just over 40 now. I can't find a new job or catch a new man. Struggling for money. I thought of getting help from Kevin again, but then I heard he remarried. So you fed Emily lies about me having an affair with Jennifer even before the divorce, trying to disrupt our life and set the stage for a divorce. That's true. When Emily locked me upstairs, Mindy had mentioned wanting to remarry Kevin. So after hearing from me, Kevin immediately contacted Mindy. Upon confronting her, it became clear she'd been manipulating Emily. The quickest way to clear Emily's misconception that I stole Kevin from Mindy was to let her hear the truth from Mindy herself. Polly. Kevin arranged for Mindy to be at the house when Emily returned from her trip. What? So, I was deceived by Mom? It seemed as if Mindy was the mastermind and Emily a victim. But even if deceived, Emily had crossed a clear line. So, I am prepared to take a firm stand. Mindy is at fault for deceiving Emily, but you're also wrong. You went too far. Don't come back to this house. What do you mean? I was deceived. Even if you were deceived, you tried to starve your mother by locking her upstairs. If the lift hadn't worked, you could have been arrested for unlawful confinement. I can't acknowledge someone who does such things as family. Emily's actions didn't constitute unlawful confinement since the lift worked. But that was just the outcome. She intended to confine me upstairs, making it a serious crime. False imprisonment is a serious crime, with no option for a fine, only imprisonment as punishment. Emily probably thought it was okay since I could move freely on the second floor, and there was water and food. But this was no child's prank, and besides, Emily was no longer a child. This is outrageous. But I'm only 19. Kicking me out of the house before I'm even 20 is unreasonable. In the eyes of the law, you're an adult at 18. But parental rights have already ended. You're not a child who can be indulged anymore. I'm still a student and can't do anything, and yet I'm considered an adult. That's the law. If you have a complaint, take it up with the government. We'll pay for your college tuition until you graduate. But you need to figure out your own living arrangements and expenses. That's impossible. Hey, I can go live with Mom, right? She'll take care of me, won't she? I can't. I'm struggling financially and tried to use you to get help. I can't possibly take care of you. Regardless of what the law says, I'm still a child. Parents should take responsibility. Make up for deceiving me. Victim by Kevin. Emily had no choice but to turn to her mother, Mindy, who was living in tight circumstances. I could also turn to Kevin, Taft of Mindy or our grandparents, but none of them were close enough to the university. Knowing her lack of options, Emily had to rely on Mindy. I can at least stay in the house. If you move in, I'll end up having to take care of your living expenses, right? I can see where this is going. I'm not like you. Oh, you're the same as me. You're my daughter, after all. An ugly, self-deprecating argument unfolded before us. I wish they would stop fighting in someone else's home. Excuse me, can you take this discussion elsewhere? Emily and Mindy left the house without a word. It felt a bit pitiful, but Kevin was right. Emily was no longer a child. She might have endangered my life if things had gone differently. Making her realize the gravity of her actions is also a parent's duty. I watched her leave, hoping for her growth in the future. In the end, Emily moved in with Mindy. Mindy was living in a cramped, cheap apartment due to her financial situation. Emily moving in meant a cramped life with no privacy. Lucky Mindy told Emily to contribute to some of the living expenses like rent and utilities. Since Kevin wouldn't provide anything other than tuition, Emily had to pay these expenses from her part-time job earnings. But as a student, she couldn't always work. Most of her earnings went to living expenses, leaving her no money to hang out with friends. It must be tough for her at an age when socializing is everything. She might even lose friends due to being seen as unsociable. Well, she should accept this as a consequence of her actions. Mindy's life became a bit easier now that she received some financial help from Emily. But instead of getting a full-time job, she continued working part-time. Emily, frustrated by the lack of money, often argued with Mindy, "You should get a full-time job, not just part-time. You're planning not to pay living expenses once my income increases, aren't you?" They often have these kinds of arguments about money. Kevin seems open to supporting Emily if she shows remorse, but that appears to be a ways off. This with Emily gone, our life as a couple has begun. Though we've been married for over a year, it feels like we're newlyweds again, and we're enjoying our time together. Divorce for the good-for-nothing who doesn't do housework or cook. I'm demanding alimony of $140,000. Looking down at me bedridden, Bob suddenly declared this. Just when I thought he had come home, suddenly divorce. Good-for-nothing who doesn't do housework or cook. What does that mean? And alimony of $140,000. That's crazy. I got sick because of the stress from Bia. I was boiling with anger at his unbelievable treatment. But I couldn't move as I wanted, unable to even sit up. I didn't want to let things go his way. With that determination, I forced a smile while still lying down. Vain. Bob's face showed shock, not expecting me to accept the divorce so easily. Now there's no turning back. I'll make him regret how he's treated me all this time. My name is Michelle. I work at a neat company called Lilacs, and I'm turning 38 this year. My job is mostly remote, and I'm incredibly busy every day but fulfilled. It's hard, but it's rewarding work. My classmates from my student days are often amazed at how much I work. However, it felt good because everyone told me that they all respect me for my dedication at my job. 3 years ago, I gained a family. I married Bob. I met Bob 4 years ago at a pub in the city when I went out to eat with friends. After dinner, while walking to the station, a man called out from behind, "Excuse me." I turned to see who it was. He was a man in a shirt and jacket, looking every bit the capable businessman who left this at the pub, he said, handing me a smartphone. I was surprised. It was unmistakably mine. "Thank you so much for bringing it to me." "No problem. I'm glad I caught you." "Hey, would you like to grab a drink now?" he asked, relieved to have returned the phone, then surprisingly invited me out. Shocked, I glanced at my friend who was about to part ways with me at the station. She seemed to say, "Go ahead," with a smile. Cha! I still wanted to talk to someone about a work mishap that day. My friend had a date and couldn't stay long, so it was perfect timing when the man approached. After parting with my friend, I went to a nearby bar with him. That was Bob, now my husband. Bob and I quickly hit it off at the bar, venting about work. We felt comfortable, like old friends, by the time we left the bar and Bob asked for my contact. We started chatting, eventually started dating, leading to marriage 2 years later. It was a whirlwind, but things were progressing so quickly. Beyond tarrying late, I was just happy to get married, given my career focus. That's what I thought then. "Michelle, get me a beer." Us lounging on the sofa, playing with his phone. Bob asked, and I sighed again. How many times now? I've lost count. 2 years into our marriage. Bob's sloppiness was too much. Bob, who works at a well-known bank, always boasts about being an elite banker and insists that people who work are the most important. I didn't know before we got married that Bob thought of himself this way. I knew he took pride in his work, but when he constantly asserts himself, it becomes exhausting. I've had it. "I'm busy, so go buy it yourself." I was at work and couldn't run errands for Bob, so I turned down his request. Then Bob, scratching the back of his head in annoyance, said, "What's so busy about working from home?" I've been slaving away at the office all day. Working from home doesn't always mean it's easy. Even when I retorted, he sarcastically replied, "Yeah, right. You can take a break anytime you want." I got tired of arguing back, silently got up from my chair, and went shopping reluctantly. "Here's your beer." I bought it. Bob didn't thank me for running the errand, nor did he pay me back, just silently took the beer. Then he got absorbed in his smartphone again. Our relationship feels more like master and slave than husband and wife. Why did Bob marry me? No, why did I marry him? Then I sighed again. It goes without saying that Bob never helped with household chores. When I suggested sharing household duties since we both work, he scoffed and said, "Share household chores? Don't joke. You're always home, so it's natural for you to do them. But I go to the office sometimes. I can't always do all the chores. Hire a maid for the days you're at the office." Bob stubbornly refused to do any housework. But despite belittling my job as easy and nagging me to do chores faster, he often demanded physical intimacy at night. Yet there's no sign of us having children. If there's a reason, it's probably me. I've heard it gets harder for women to conceive in their late 30s. I thought it'd be fine to enjoy married life without children, but Bob seemed dissatisfied. If you can't have a child, you're really useless. He sneered, infuriating me. He's useless at home himself. I doubt if he's really that efficient at work. Capable workers manage their personal life and chores effortlessly. I've been skeptical about Bob's work performance. Speaking of doubts, Bob's been coming home late for months. I don't know about the busy banking seasons, but whenever I mention his late hours, he just says, "My job's tough, unlike yours." After months of late returns, I even started suspecting something fishy. It was only natural to suspect that he might be cheating. One night, Bob came home late as usual and collapsed at the entrance. Approaching him, it was clear he was heavily drunk, unable to stand up. His eyes were closed, nearly losing consciousness. I sighed and approached to untie Bob's tie when he muttered something unexpected. "Take to me, Amy, but just a little longer," he whispered in a sweet, melting voice. "Amy?" Startled, I wondered who Amy was. Was it sleep talk or confusion from the alcohol? But Bob just started snoring asleep. Growing suspicious, I installed hidden cameras throughout the house. Next week, I had a business trip, leaving the house for 2 days. I thought it was an ideal opportunity for Bob to bring a lover home. But there was no solid proof. But if he did bring someone, it would be evidence of his infidelity. That's why I set up the cameras. A week later, I left nonchalantly for the trip, saying I'm off then. Bob waved with a smile. He seemed too happy, which irritated me. Upon returning 2 days later, I immediately checked the camera footage. And as I feared, it showed Bob with a lover, and I couldn't watch it all because it made me sick, but it was undeniable proof of cheating. My fists clenched in rage. I almost crushed the small camera. Unforgivable. He's crossed a line. Did he think he'd get away with this? Confirming Bob's cheating filled me with anger and sadness. His constant berating, saying the food's awful or the floor's dirty, had been piling up stress. I'd been considering divorce, but my suddenly busy work schedule delayed finding the right moment. Eventually, juggling work and house chores wore me down. I collapsed from exhaustion. I took the day off work. Of course, I couldn't handle house duties. Bob knew I was sick, but left silently for work and returned home around 6 p.m. It was earlier than usual. Then he came to the room where I was bedridden. The smell of alcohol was so strong, it made me nauseous. Without a care for my condition, Bob looked down at me. Divorce for the good-for-nothing who doesn't do housework or cook. I'm demanding alimony of $140,000. Looking down at me, bedridden, he suddenly declared this. Just when I thought he had come home, suddenly divorce. Good for nothing, who doesn't do housework or cook. What does that mean? An alimony of $140,000. That's crazy. I got sick because of the stress from Bob. I was boiling with anger at his unbelievable treatment. But my body wouldn't move as I wished, and I couldn't even get up. I didn't want to let things go Bob's way. This with that determination. I forced a smile while still lying down. A chance. Fine. Bob's face showed shock, not expecting me to accept the divorce so easily. Now there's no turning back. I'll make him regret how he's treated me all this time. A few days later, once my fever subsided and I felt better, I went to see a lawyer for a divorce application. After I finished the meeting with the lawyer, I waited for Bob to return home. I'm home. That evening, Bob came home around 10 p.m., reeking of alcohol and a perfume I had never smelled on him before. I confronted him with the divorce application as he walked in. I want a divorce, I said in a low voice. Bob snorted and grabbed the application. Finally, I can be free. I couldn't tell if it was sarcasm or genuine, but he smirked. If he wanted a divorce so badly, he should have found a lawyer who assists with divorce by himself. But he probably wanted me to be the one to bring it up. I was fed up with his pettiness. I'll be filing for alimony, just so you know. I thought it pathetic that he, having cheated, thought he could demand alimony from me. I remained silent, simply watching the divorce proceedings unfold. Eventually, the divorce process was finalized and I was free from Bob's tyranny. It felt like an anticlimactic end to our marriage. But I couldn't bring myself to forgive him. I decided to take action to make Bob regret his actions. Over the next few days, I packed up my belongings. I was leaving this house. It is a second-hand condo we bought when we got married 2 years ago. I had no attachment to it, so I chose to leave. Don't you ever come back? Bob said with a smirk as I packed. He probably planned to live here with his mistress once I left. The thought made me sick, but the hidden camera footage showed he was quite into her. Ignoring Bob's words, I left with my suitcase. At least I'm free from his verbal abuse. I let out a sigh of relief. I immediately went to a real estate agent and found a rental. It's a bit small, but the rent is reasonable, and it's a well-maintained women-only building. I signed the lease right away. I'll be staying at a hotel for a week until I can move in. Afterward, I finished some banking and checked into the hotel. All the while, I plotted my revenge on Bob. The plan I came up with gave me goosebumps. That's it. This is the only way. Imagining Bob's astonished face made me almost burst into laughter. Just watch. You won't get off easy this time. The next day, I took bold action. I think I did something bold. I felt satisfied after completing my task. Life was peaceful afterward. Being single again. I no longer had to cook or do laundry for Bob, which was a relief. I even regretted not divorcing sooner if something like this happened. I returned to my single life and was able to make progress in my work. A month later, a call came in the middle of the night. Woken up by the ringtone, I wondered who it could be at this hour, and to my surprise, it was Bob. At first, I ignored it, but he kept calling. If I continued to ignore it, my sleep would be disturbed. Extremely reluctantly, I answered, "Hello." When I answered the phone in a sleepy voice, I could hear cars and trains in the background. He seemed to be outside. The discomfort of being woken up, and hearing the noise was evident in my voice as I waited for Bob's response. "Michelle," you finally answered. "What's the meaning of this?" Bob's shout was so loud it jolted me awake. I knew what he was about to say, but I pretended to be clueless and asked, "What do you mean?" "Don't play dumb. I got a call from the bank yesterday. They're suddenly firing me. I'm in Italy on my honeymoon, and I don't understand any of this." So, he was on his honeymoon in Italy. Being Italy, there must be some time difference. That's why he called at this time. His disregard for other situations was so typical of Bob. That sounds serious. Good luck with that by now. I tried to end the call with a normal response, but Bob shouted, "Hey, wait." Annoyed, I sighed but held off hanging up. I asked why they're firing me. Guess what they said? "You caused us to lose a major client." And when I asked which company, they said Lilacs Corporation. "That's where you work." Bob explained how he got fired, but I had anticipated this. After all, I was the one who orchestrated everything. I closed my eyes in the dim light, taking a deep breath. This was my chance to settle the score with Bob. After inhaling deeply, I said, "Yes, I know, because I'm the one who withdrew our business from your bank." Which on the other end of the phone, Bob gasped in disbelief. Then a woman's flirty voice asked from his side, "Hey, are you done yet?" I continued unfazed. "You might not have known, but I am the president of Lilacs Corporation." "President?" "Yes, I am the president." Bob probably thought of me as just another remote worker. But in reality, I rarely work on site because I am the president. I left my first job after 3 years to pursue my dream of starting my own company, and it's been over a decade since. The company grew, and we started receiving substantial loans from banks, including the major bank where Bob worked. After we split, I decided to repay all the loans we had from the bank. The bank's sales representative was taken aback. They would lose the interest they were expecting to receive from us. As to my decision to pay back everything at once was probably unexpected for them. "Could you reconsider your decision?" the representative asked me in a panic. I said, "I have one condition." "Fire Bob." The representative was flustered and brought his manager. It was someone I knew from previous dealings with Lilacs Corp. "What's going on?" I was asked by the manager I had been close with. I decided to tell him everything. Actually, Bob has been having an affair with the daughter of your bank's president. He ridiculed me, left me without paying for his sin, and now he's planning to remarry her. I couldn't stand it. I had learned about Bob's affair with the president's daughter from the hidden cameras in our house. Their conversations were recorded too. The sales representative and manager turned pale upon hearing my story and seemed desperate to continue business with my company. Probably the news reached the president, who must have been furious to learn his daughter was involved with a married man. They promised to fire Bob, so I held off on repaying the loan in full. That's why I still have dealings with the bank Bob used to work at. I knew about his firing before he even called me. What? You're the deceitful one. You dumped all the housework on me, ridiculed me, and cheated. And now you say I'm the bad one? Can't you think logically? And you called yourself an elite employee. That's laughable. I'll definitely be claiming alimony from you because of your insults. But to think you believed you'd get alimony after cheating. Also, I've transferred the mortgage of the house to you. I was the one paying for it after all. I unleashed all the stress he had caused me over the phone. What? Bob was speechless at my irrefutable logic. However, the next moment, I heard a weaker voice on the other end of the phone say, "Come, please forgive me. Dare me the alimony. And the mortgage too. Amy is pregnant. I can't imagine being in debt with a child on the way. I've lost my job and don't know what to do. Please overlook this, please." Bob's pathetic apology only made me sigh. I thought about how foolish I was to have put up with him for 2 years. Forgive? There's nothing to forgive. I want nothing to do with you ever again. The alimony is a severance payment. This is all your fault, isn't it? Why should I have to endure any more? I have nothing more to say to you. Let me run away and hide in some foreign land for all I care. Goodbye. Ignoring Bob's plea to wait, I hung up the phone. I should be thanked for even answering his call in the middle of the night. Exhausted, I went back to bed. I doubted I would ever talk to Bob again. I felt liberated thinking about a life without him. When I thought of that, my heart sank. Later, when Bob returned from an overseas trip, my lawyer requested compensation. Bob had spent a fortune on his mistress and was nearly penniless. But the mistress, a president's daughter, had been disowned after this incident. But her family's money to fall back on. Bob and she had no choice but to take on debt. He said he was trying to find a new job, but now that the news of this incident has become known, his job hunting is having a difficult time. Apparently, Bob, once boasting about being an elite banker, was often slacking off at work, which drastically dropped his sales performance. The company found a perfect reason to fire him. Smiled Bob and his mistress were barely getting by with part-time jobs. First, with the mistress pregnant, she wouldn't be able to work much longer. I doubted Bob could support a 3-person household alone. I felt they deserved to experience hardship. Meanwhile, my business was thriving, and I decided to further expand it. I secured a larger loan from the same bank Bob worked at. As my salary increased, and I started planning to buy my own house for fulfilling a lifelong dream. I'm looking forward from now. Though I lost a husband, I had supportive colleagues and business partners. In a fortunate environment, I was motivated to continue working hard. I guess I still prefer you. Poor wife. Just married yesterday, my husband laughed at me with his mistress, making a fool of me. Caught off guard. I was speechless. I couldn't understand why he married me if he was having an affair or what he was thinking when he proposed. But one thing was clear. I couldn't stay with him anymore. Please do as you wish. And despite the turmoil, picture as SFUTE, I was anything but calm inside, but I couldn't bear to deal with these two unreasonable people any longer. My name is Emily Johnson, 31 years old. I work in an office, and since starting my job, I've been going out more on weekends with colleagues and friends. Thanks to that, my hobbies have expanded from reading and watching movies to include more physical activities, making my life more fulfilling. Though my job is sedentary, I've become more active on weekends. I feel like I've gotten stronger since becoming a working adult. Just during this lifestyle, I met my husband, Michael, in my late 20s, at a golf tournament I was invited to by a colleague. Michael loved golf and patiently taught me, a beginner at the time. We were the same age, which made it easy to talk, and that golf outing was really enjoyable. We didn't exchange contact information then, and I thought that would be the end of it. However, we kept bumping into each other when I went out and eventually exchanged numbers. We started dating as we realized we shared many hobbies and got along well. We dated for about 3 years, 2 of which we lived together. Then he proposed, and we began planning our wedding. When we moved in together, we decided I would cook and Michael would clean, which worked well. Michael liked things tidy and kept the house clean. But I had one issue with him, his obsession with hobbies. He enjoyed golf and cycling outdoors and gaming indoors. He also meticulously maintained his golf clubs and cycling gear. Sometimes he would take over 30 minutes to come for dinner when called. I understood the feeling of getting caught up in something since it happened to me too. However, it was frustrating when meals got cold because he wouldn't come immediately. I understand my husband. Michael likes to take care of his own equipment. And unlike me, who rents stuff as needed, he prefers owning and maintaining his own, which takes time. I get it because I play video games too, though not as much as him. I know how it feels to be so caught up in a game that you just can't stop. But there's a limit, you know. Hey, can you come to dinner before it gets cold? You can pause your game at a good spot in like 1 to 2 minutes, right? Calms Hipples. I've been reminding Michael frequently not to get too lost in his hobbies. Understand wanting to enjoy hobbies, but if that's too much, at least set aside specific times for them. Our meal times are pretty much fixed, so I asked him to plan his activities around that. We made sure to have our own time for hobbies, even when living together. But there were times, even when we were supposed to be spending time together, when Michael would be preoccupied with his hobbies and not fully engaged in our conversations. After it happened dozens of times, I reached my breaking point. "Sorry, I just got too carried away," Michael would say, showing remorse, but he never really changed. He seemed to feel bad about it, always apologizing after I pointed it out. "Sorry for always having to remind you." Despite this behavior from Michael, my irritation towards him would deflate. There were times when I felt anxious about going through with the marriage, thinking it was just his old habits and hoping he would change. Even though he didn't improve much after my reminders, I had no other complaints, so I decided to patiently keep pointing it out. Sometimes, Michael would suddenly go out for night cycling and return hours later. "So late? Isn't it dangerous? Why don't you go tomorrow?" I was worried because there's less visibility at night and more risk of accidents. "It's fine. Plus, there are fewer people at night, so I can cycle as much as I want without worrying about bumping into anyone," he'd say, excitedly heading out. Actually, I was concerned when he would stay out for hours, but I knew the joy of hobbies and couldn't really stop him. I thought he probably wanted to enjoy his hobbies as much as possible now, knowing things would change once we had kids and he couldn't immerse himself as much. I frequently reminded him not to stay out too late, but I couldn't bring myself to stop him completely. Still, I was a bit worried about his deep involvement in his hobbies. But when we talked about our life after marriage, I felt I was worrying too much, especially when we talked about kids. Michael seemed eager to spend time with them. He was also enthusiastic about planning our wedding, so I believed things would change after we got married. Our wedding preparations went smoothly, and we had a big ceremony after registering our marriage. We were blessed by colleagues, friends, and family, which made me very happy. Since Michael and I met through mutual friends and colleagues, many of our guests already knew our relationship, making the wedding celebration even more joyful. I remember smiling throughout the ceremony, feeling incredibly happy. We planned to go on our honeymoon a few days after the wedding. Oh, the wedding was fun. It was tiring, so we went to bed early that night, looking forward to our trip. I wondered if I'd be able to sleep with all the excitement, but I was more tired than I thought and fell asleep quickly. However, maybe because of what I was thinking before sleeping, I woke up much earlier than usual the next day. I woke up refreshed, but it was still around 4 a.m. I thought about going back to sleep, but then I realized Michael wasn't in bed. Just thinking he may have woken up early too. I decided to get up and talk with him. As I left the room to find him, I heard voices in the living room and was curious. I thought he might be on the phone, but as I got closer, I realized it was a woman's voice, not over the phone. That woke me up completely. A strange woman was in our house, talking with Michael alone. Realizing this, the happiness I felt just moments ago turned ice cold. Nervous but driven, I burst through the door to see who Michael was with, and I and Uncle prayed to see who Michael was with. Exes tearing the room. There was Michael and an unfamiliar woman, both fully dressed early in the morning. The woman with perfect makeup. She was quite beautiful and dressed in an elegant and feminine style. I was confused about why she was in our house, but had a bad feeling about it. "What's going on here?" I asked Michael coldly, surprised and confused. I had hoped it was just my overthinking, but my fears were quickly shattered. In response to my question, my husband Michael replied in a carefree, cheerful tone, saying something unbelievable. "I've decided to call off our marriage and marry her instead. I guess I still prefer my ex," he said, chuckling and putting his arm around the woman next to him. Poor wife. The woman mocked me without any shame, chuckling as she looked down on me. Huh. We had just gotten married yesterday, and here he was saying such things. It took me a moment to grasp what he was saying, as it was so casually stated. As I began to comprehend his words, I doubted if this was the same man I had prepared for marriage with just yesterday. Stunned, I stared at Michael, who was behaving as usual. Looking at me, the woman with a demeaning look said, "Kinda feel sorry for the wife." But then a wife who doesn't notice anything is questionable too. She then smugly started bragging about how close she and Michael were. And see, according to her, she was Michael's ex-girlfriend and they had reconnected by chance, leading to an affair that had been going on for a year. Indeed, that was around the time Michael suddenly started going on night cycling trips. His actions now made sense in retrospect, but at the time, I humbly thought he was getting more into his hobbies. The idea that he was cheating was completely unexpected. Michael has always been crazy about me, the ex-girlfriend boasted, flaunting her supposed superiority in beauty and charm. Indeed, in contrast to her well-dressed and made-up appearance. I was in my plain pajamas and makeup-free, which felt humiliating. Her words infuriated me, but the shock of learning about Michael's affair and being caught off guard in the morning left me speechless. However, I reassured myself that my character was definitely better than hers. But I couldn't understand why Michael proposed to me if he was cheating. As I pondered this, Michael scornfully said, "At first, you were nice and fun to be with, but you became too nagging. I'm tired of being with you." He went on about how great his ex was, and she looked triumphantly satisfied. Apparently, he didn't like being constantly reminded by me. This revelation made me realize Michael's true nature, and I felt no issue in deciding on divorce. While initially overwhelmed with sadness at being cheated on and criticized for my concern, I was now just astonished. I had loved Michael, but now I felt my feelings cooling rapidly, able to think about the situation with unexpected calmness. Well, I couldn't forgive him. I was relieved that there were no children involved between us. Well, we just got married, but let's divorce. I'll need to explain the reasons to our acquaintances, I said calmly, thinking about what lay ahead. I felt a bit guilty about divorcing so soon after our wedding, celebrated by so many. Running to the paperwork would be complicated since we were already registered, which was a bit disheartening. But considering the circumstances, it was clear who was at fault and who was behaving unreasonably. I was surprisingly composed, but Jates, though I was angry about Michael's affair. I knew others would support me, which was somewhat comforting. Then Michael shocked me further. "What are you talking about? I'm not getting a divorce." Despite saying he wanted to marry his mistress, his refusal to divorce was baffling. His casual statement made me wonder if bigamy had suddenly become legal in the US. His words made no sense, especially since we had seemed so compatible in hobbies and values. As I stood there confused, the two of them started talking as if they had a great idea. Michael, seemingly wanting to hide his affair, smugly suggested filing a missing person report. Even if we don't file for divorce, it'll automatically happen after 3 years. You'll get sympathy and concern from everyone around you, and I can marry her without any trouble. It's perfect for both of us, right? He was threatening me, suggesting I play the role of a pitiful woman abandoned right after marriage. Moreover, his win-win was clearly a loss for me. He seemed oblivious to the fact that he was asking me to waste 3 years for his sake. It's bad optics to divorce so soon after getting married, right? Ex-girlfriend said, smugly agreeing with Michael, thinking she was being considerate. I felt like I was looking at two aliens with their bizarre logic. This made me dumbstruck. The two of them, satisfied with their plan, hurriedly got up to leave the house. Then go ahead and file a missing person report. Disgusted with their reasoning, and realizing it was pointless to talk further, I, exhausted from the morning's events, sighed and said, "Please do whatever you want." But when I said that, they seemed to think I had accepted their proposal and happily left the house together. After they left the house, BC, I was initially stunned by the rapid turn of events, but I knew I couldn't afford to be lost in thought. I had to focus on what lay ahead. Regaining my composure, I quickly started making plans for the future. Then suddenly, I heard, "Hey, what are you doing? I know you're there. Open up." 3 days later, my husband Michael, who had run away on a whim, stormed back into the house. Is in a frenzy and clearly not in his right mind, he was accompanied by his ex-girlfriend, who seemed quite confused. "What brings you here?" The man who cheated and left. Anticipating Michael might return, I remained calm and did not open the door, responding through it instead. But annoyed by my response, Michael yelled, "Don't mess with me! You haven't sold my stuff, have you?" In fact, after he left, I gathered all of Michael's belongings, intending to sell them as compensation for his infidelity and disturbance. If he had no intention of returning, I figured it wouldn't be a problem to sell them. I had taken photos of his packed items and emailed him about my intention to sell them. These were items he had treasured, so it was a bit of retaliation for his thoughtless actions. I thought he might not notice since he was planning to go missing, but he quickly responded in a panic, which I ignored. But despite his subsequent emails pleading not to sell, throw away, or asking to have them sent. I felt no obligation to heed the words of a cheating husband. That's why he came to the house in such a frenzy today. Realizing I had no intention of opening the door, Michael, who apparently had a key, entered the house on his own, pushed past me, and immediately began checking and moving out his belongings. Good, everything's here. Relieved to see his gaming console, golf equipment, and mountain bike all intact. Michael was visibly pleased. Some items were quite expensive, worth thousands of dollars, so his joy at finding them all was evident. I was dismayed that he prioritized possessions over everything else, even though he had talked about disappearing. Watching Michael frantically check his belongings, I felt an additional chill toward him. Did you really come back just for these things? I thought, not the only one feeling this way, as the ex-girlfriend looked at him with a cold gaze. She had not expected Michael to prioritize his belongings over their future together. Although Michael told her to help, she just stood there, stunned. Then voices at the open front door caught my attention. "Good morning, ex-Emily. We came to help. Is everything okay?" Why is the door wide open? My in-laws had planned to visit today, but Michael and his ex-girlfriend, unaware of this, panicked and tried to hide, but it was too late. But before they could hide, my in-laws entered the house. Seeing my husband Michael, who wasn't supposed to be there, they exclaimed in surprise, "You? What are you doing here? Do you realize what you've done to Emily? You've caused trouble for everyone." I had already informed my family and friends that Michael had cheated and run away. I also reported that he said to file a missing person report. Initially skeptical, my in-laws began to believe it when they couldn't get in touch with their son and learned about his affair. My parents had come yesterday to help with moving preparations, and today it was my in-laws' turn. I had told them I didn't want to live in a house that reminded me of my cheating husband, and they, apologizing for their son's behavior, kindly offered to help. I had always had a good relationship with my in-laws. I often stayed at their house, joining them for their health walks, cooking with my mother-in-law, and playing board games, which was my father-in-law's hobby. They were delighted when Michael and I first visited to announce our marriage. While spending time with them, my mother-in-law let slip why they were so happy about our marriage. It was because of Michael's ex-girlfriend, who had previously been a topic of marriage discussion. She was overly possessive, often storming in on Michael regardless of time or place. Additionally, she was rude to my in-laws, speaking to them disrespectfully. Her bad behavior led my in-laws to oppose the marriage. Marriage only made the two of them more stubborn about it. They were trying to go against my in-laws' wishes and get married. The ex-girlfriend had been overly clingy to Michael from the start, making it uncomfortable for him at work. Eventually, he had to change jobs because of her, leading to their breakup. As I listened to my mother-in-law speaking about the ex-girlfriend and her outrageous behavior, I couldn't say much more than nod in agreement. That's why we were so happy when Emily became our daughter-in-law. Thank you so much, she said sincerely, making me realize how much they must have struggled at the time. Having already heard this from her when Michael ran off with his ex, I knew he was too simple-minded for me to handle, which made it easy for me to decide on the divorce. My in-laws, who had been so happy about our marriage, were understandably furious with their son's disgraceful behavior. Upon finding Michael in the house, they immediately began scolding their irresponsible son, and he, intimidated by their presence, meekly sat down on the floor. Meanwhile, the ex-girlfriend, seeming to have had enough of Michael, tried to sneak out of the house with a pale face. "Where do you think you're going?" I called out loudly as she attempted to escape alone. "This has nothing to do with me. I'm returning Michael to you," she said in a fluster, trying to leave, but my in-laws caught her and began scolding her alongside Michael. After my in-laws thoroughly reprimanded them, I declared that they would both have to compensate for the affair. I'll be expecting a substantial amount in damages for the affair, though I was too shocked to say anything when they eloped. I wanted them to fully atone for what they had done. Additionally, my anger towards my husband's attitude and his affair had only grown over these 3 days. I was determined not to be lenient with him anymore. To fulfill this, I stood imposingly before the two of them with a cold voice and announced my demand for alimony. At the word alimony, they seemed quite surprised, as if they hadn't expected it. "What? Alimony?" Their shock, as if they had never considered it, only fueled my anger further. And when I mentioned the going rate for alimony, they panicked and began to say they couldn't pay. "We don't have that kind of money, and there's no need to pay." Though I knew that Michael had been pouring most of his salary, beyond what was needed for living expenses, into his hobbies. But twice, I had warned him several times during our cohabitation, but he always said he wanted to spend on his hobbies until we were married. Still, since we started dating, he had begun to save a bit, so I didn't push too hard, hoping things would change after marriage. My husband, faced with the prospect of paying alimony, disliked the idea so much he turned pale, contemplating borrowing money or selling his possessions. "No way! I'll be broke." His ex-girlfriend, too, seemed to have little savings and started saying she didn't want to pay. When my in-laws glared at the two of them sharply, they became quiet and looked down, seemingly frightened. But to add insult to injury, I told them about the past 3 days. "Also, everyone who attended our wedding knows about your affair. Don't expect to live like before." "What? No way." At our wedding, there were people from Michael's company and friends from his student days. But when they heard about his elopement after the affair, they were very angry, and he had no one on his side. "My life is ruined because of you. What are you gonna do about it?" Then he started lashing out at his ex-girlfriend. "Blaming me? You were the one who said you wanted to marry me." So they began to argue and blame each other, starting a huge fight. That's both quick to blame others when things went south. They were a perfect match in that regard, and their arguments were equally at fault. "Nothing good comes from being with you. I shouldn't have gotten involved. That's my line. You've messed up my life. Just a few days ago, these two were close enough to elope, but now, without any remorse, they were angrily blaming each other. But despite being engaged and married to me, Michael chose his ex-girlfriend. There was a problem with her too, knowing it was an affair yet still dating him. The two of them, always blaming others without reflecting on their actions, seemed to deserve each other. Watching their foolish fight, I could only look on in dismay. Later, Michael completely lost the trust of his company due to this incident and his unexplained absence. He had a position but didn't contact anyone and seemed intent on disappearing, angering many for his lack of responsibility. Yet, it was natural since his 3-day disappearance had caused trouble for other employees. As a result, he was demoted and soon left the company because it became uncomfortable for him. Friends drifted away, and soon no one was approaching him. A year later, with no income and little savings, Michael grumbled about the alimony, but with my in-laws watching, he ended up paying in full. Once the payment was confirmed, I was relieved that I wouldn't have to see my husband again. His ex-girlfriend initially tried to avoid paying alimony and was unresponsive to contact. So, I had no choice but to find her parents, explain the situation in a detailed letter, and include evidence of the affair. They soon contacted me at the number I provided in the letter, apologizing and agreeing to pay the alimony. It seemed the ex-girlfriend had returned to her parents' house and was scolded by them. Thus the alimony was successfully paid, and I was able to divorce, but for a while, I felt uncomfortable due to the sympathy of those around me who knew the situation. However, things have settled down, and I'm back to living as I did before marriage. I haven't met or contacted my ex-husband since the divorce, but I maintain a good relationship with my former in-laws. By the way, my ex-husband, scolded severely by his parents until the divorce, is now in a near-disowned state and has moved to a distant place. Now, my relationship with my ex-in-laws is like that of good friends with a significant age gap, enjoying hobbies together. Later, I heard through the grapevine that my ex-husband, blaming his hobbies, is living a poor life. It seems he still blames everything but his own disrespectful and irrational behavior. I used to think marriage would change him, but now I'm glad I divorced such an impossible ex-husband. If it takes in hindsight, there were signs of his true nature during our cohabitation, and I regret not realizing it before we got married. It was a tough ordeal, but I'm relieved that I discovered his true self before we had kids and was able to leave him. Next time, if I consider marriage, I won't optimistically assume that marriage will change troubling behaviors. Instead, I'll be sure to thoroughly assess the person. Success of it, I now relish the freedom of living alone without needing to keep an eye on my ex-husband. You're such a failure. You can't even have kids. These harsh words from my in-laws pierced my heart. Yeah, they're right, agreed my husband. Effins. I bit my lip hard, trying to endure this unbearable situation. My in-laws, still looking like they had more complaints, laughed mockingly at me. But then, Ethan suddenly let out a laugh. As he burst into laughter, all the relatives gathered around joined in with loud laughter. Surprised by Ethan and the relatives suddenly laughing, my in-laws' eyes widened in shock. Did everyone hear that? Ignoring my clueless in-laws. Ethan turned to the relatives. And I nodded in agreement. Finally realizing they were left out of the loop, my in-laws' faces filled with panic. This was my chance. Just a chance to fight back against my in-laws who had tormented and insulted me for so long. I clenched my fists tightly. My name is Natalie. I'm 33 years old and work at a publishing house. As a child, my love for books was sparked by my single mother who used to read picture books to me. Becoming a literary editor has always been my dream, and I am proud to be doing the job now. I've been with the same company since I graduated, initially handling sales and magazine assignments. 3 years ago, I finally made the switch to literary editing. However, in the beginning, I was completely clueless about what to do in literary editing. It was different from working in sales or magazine editing. I was utterly lost. It was my husband, Ethan, who also worked in literary editing, who came to my aid. Ethan, a senior with 5 years of experience in literary editing, patiently taught me everything I didn't understand. He's incredibly kind to his subordinates and meticulous in his work methods. He even volunteered for the unpopular task of training newbies, a testament to his kindness. We started spending more time together. Naturally, we grew closer. When Ethan invited me to dinner under the pretext of work consultation, we ended up having a great time and got drunk. Our meetings outside of work increased, and eventually, Ethan confessed his feelings for me. Feeling the same way, I was overjoyed and immediately accepted his proposal, marking the start of our relationship. A year later, he proposed, and we happily married. Even after marrying Ethan, I didn't quit my job. Editing is as busy as it sounds, with many working into the night. Even though we start a bit late in the morning, our working hours are significantly longer than other jobs. My mother, living far away, was initially worried, but when I told her how much I loved my job, she supported me, saying, "If you love it that much, keep at it even after marriage or having kids." Ethan felt the same, assuring me, "And I understand, we're in the same field. It'll be fine." So, I didn't quit for marriage and continued working as a literary editor with Ethan. Becoming a family with someone I shared interests with and who was so kind made me extremely happy. Little did I know what married life had in store for us. It all started with a phone call. Just a month after our wedding, I returned home early to prepare dinner and received a call on my smartphone. It was an unfamiliar number. Beat with trepidation, I pressed the call button. "Hello, I'm Natalie. Finally, you picked up. I thought you wouldn't answer." I winced momentarily at the sound of my mother-in-law's raspy voice. My in-laws live in a town just 3 stops away from our house by train, relatively close by. Since my mother lives in a distant rural area, I had thought of relying on my in-laws for anything urgent. I've been calling you several times and you didn't answer. Ah, sorry about that. I always switch my phone to silent mode when I get home, so I didn't notice the multiple calls from my mother-in-law. I had only met her twice before, during our pre-marriage introduction and the meeting of both families, and both times she appraised me with a scrutinizing look. That's why I reflexively became averse to her, avoiding any interaction until today. Anyway, Natalie, do you know about that super popular cake shop near your house's train station? Cake? Oh yeah, it's often featured on TV. Exactly. I need you to buy a cake from there and bring it to me right now. Now, I looked at the clock. It was 9:12 p.m. A cake shop wouldn't be open at this hour. Besides, if she wanted a cake, she could just go buy it herself tomorrow. Wei asked me, I'm sorry, but the cake shop is probably closed now. I can try tomorrow, but I can't promise anything due to my work schedule. While I was mentally reviewing my schedule for the next day, my mother-in-law snapped, "Don't be so stingy. I have a bad leg. That's why I'm asking you. Can't you do this one thing for me?" She suddenly spoke in a commanding tone, and I was at a loss for words. This was the first time I had a proper one-on-one conversation with her. I didn't know she was the type to give orders like this. Aha, I can try tomorrow. Just not today, please. Humpy a tans and VILX slide, since you're Ethan's wife. Make sure you buy the cake as soon as the shop opens tomorrow. After having her say, she abruptly hung up. What in the world? I was already tired from work, and this unreasonable demand from my mother-in-law only added to my fatigue. Well, as long as I get the cake tomorrow. I resigned myself, and an hour later, I had dinner with Ethan still in our honeymoon phase. The next day, I left home an hour earlier than usual. But Shang's leaving already. Yes, I've got a busy day at work. I see. Take care. Not wanting to worry Ethan. I lied to him a bit. He didn't suspect anything and saw me off. I did, as my mother-in-law asked, buying the most popular cake at the station and delivering it to her house. You're late. Did you oversleep or something? She said mockingly to me, who had just brought her the cake. I was dumbfounded by her nerves. No, I bought it as soon as the shop opened. Sorry for being late. Oh, stop it. Don't show me such a gloomy face this early. I'll graciously accept this then. That without a word of thanks, she just took the cake and started to go inside. I called out, "Excuse me. That money for the cake. Money? There's no such thing. You're actively working and earning, aren't you?" After dismissing my request, she slammed the door shut. I stood there dumbstruck. The cost of the cake wasn't that high. But how could she not even pay or say thanks after asking me to buy it? But to make matters worse, she ridiculed me. Felt my heart racing as I realized my mother-in-law's true nature, which I hadn't seen before our marriage. The marriage. But the thought of having to deal with her from now on weighed heavily on me. True to form, after getting her way with the cake, she started ordering me around more often. Sometimes it was to buy a branded wallet at a department store sale, other times to come over and cook. She even went as far as demanding a monthly allowance, which left me exasperated. Ethan and I, both working, lived in a downtown apartment close to the station, where the rent was exorbitantly high. Just one pantries and McClatries, only we were struggling as it was, barely making ends meet and saving up. There was no way we could afford to send her money. I just can't afford to send money. Maybe I can bring a cake instead, that might help. Despite my refusal, my mother-in-law kept pestering me with calls, always asking, "Have you sent the money yet?" I had grown to dread her calls, but I didn't want to worry Ethan, so I kept it to myself. This continued, and it's been almost 2 years since we got married. About a year ago, Ethan and I started talking about wanting kids, but there was no sign of it happening. Anxious, I went to a clinic for tests and found out that the fertility issues were on my end. The condition wasn't such that it was impossible to conceive, so after discussing it with Ethan, we decided I would take a break from work to focus on getting pregnant. Trying to conceive was tough and taxing, both mentally and physically. Ethan always encouraged me, saying, "Let's keep going at our own pace." His kindness brought tears to my eyes. With Ethan by my side, I felt I could endure the difficult journey. Just as I was trying to stay positive, my mother-in-law called again. "Adelise, still no baby? I really want to see my grandchild. But I guess it's too much to expect from you. I wonder why Ethan even married you." What? Her cruel words were a shock. Then she started calling every day, pressuring me about having a child. If I didn't answer, they'd call back repeatedly, so eventually I had no choice but to pick up. I braved through their relentless attacks. But Ethan noticed something was off and one day asked me, "Is something wrong?" I had intended to keep my mother-in-law's behavior from Ethan, but his concern made everything I had been holding back spill out. Ethan, actually, I confessed everything that had been happening since we got married, the demands, the snide remarks from my mother-in-law, and the ongoing harassment about money and having a child. My tears revealed all the pent-up frustration and sadness. That must have been hard. I'm sorry I didn't notice sooner. After hearing everything, Ethan apologized with a look of regret. I saw tears spilling from his eyes. "No, it's my fault for not telling you. That's not true. I had no idea you were suffering so much. I can't forgive this. It's been a long time since I've been this angry." Ethan was visibly trembling, overwhelmed with emotion. I was so touched that he empathized with my feelings. "We can't just let my parents continue like this. I have a plan." "A plan?" "Yes. You know we gather with relatives every New Year's Day, right? We'll do it then." Ethan shared his plan to confront my in-laws. "I don't know if it'll work, but let's try our best." Hearing his strong voice, I felt a deep sense of relief. I wasn't alone. I trusted Ethan, ready to face my in-laws. Months passed. During these months, I continued to endure verbal abuse from my in-laws about money and children. Though I always acted as if nothing was wrong when talking to my mom, but recently she mentioned something concerning. I got a call from an unknown number the other day. My mom, a hardworking single mother, had started showing signs of forgetfulness. I usually half believed her stories, but this time, I couldn't ignore it. Digging deeper, I uncovered a shocking truth. That's unacceptable. I will definitely protect you. Mom. Okay. I'm over the phone. My mom sounded solemn, like a child. My mind was full of the information she shared. And so life rushed by and the new year arrived. Every New Year's Day, Ethan's family and relatives gather at his parents' house. This time, I went with Ethan, determined. By the time we arrived at Ethan's parents' house, his uncles and aunts and their families had already gathered, and we were the last to arrive. "Oh, Natalie, you're late." Not even helping and just being carefree. But despite Ethan being with me, my in-laws only directed their sarcasm at me. "Happy New Year? I hope it's a good one for all of us." Ignoring their sarcasm, I greeted them formally, which seemed to irritate my in-laws even more. Then I helped with the meal preparation and sat down at the table with the relatives. My father-in-law was handing out sweet wine to everyone, but I politely declined to drink it. Then my in-laws glared at me and said, "What's the matter? Natalie, got a problem? Not drinking the wine we offered. What kind of daughter-in-law does that?" I hadn't expected to be spoken to like this, just for not drinking the wine and in front of the relatives. I could only bow my head in shame. Eventually, my in-laws spoke again, with a tone of annoyance. What a disappointment. And a failure who can't even have kids. They both exclaimed, their words piercing my heart. "Yeah, she's right," agreed Ethan, my husband siding with his parents. I bit my lip hard, enduring the unbearable situation. And my in-laws, still looking like they had more to complain about, laughed loudly and mockingly at me. But then, Ethan suddenly burst out laughing. As he did, the gathered relatives joined in with roaring laughter. Surprised by Ethan and everyone else suddenly laughing, my in-laws' eyes widened in shock. Did everyone hear that? Ignoring my clueless in-laws, Ethan turned to the relatives. Both the relatives and they nodded emphatically. Finally realizing they were being left out of the loop, my in-laws' faces filled with panic. This was my chance. A chance to strike back at my in-laws who'd been tormenting and insulting me for so long. I clenched my fists tightly. Dad, didn't you know? Ellie's pregnant." "Pregnant?" Their eyes widened in disbelief. Knowing that I was infertile, they had constantly called me, urging me to hurry up and have kids. So their shock at the news of my pregnancy was understandable. In truth, as Ethan said, I had discovered I was pregnant 3 months ago. Now at 5 months, I had just entered the stable period of pregnancy. Ethan had apparently messaged his parents about it, but unsurprisingly, they hadn't noticed his message. They're only interested in what they want to do, Ethan had said. But still, to ignore a message from their own son. They had been saying how sorry they felt for Ethan because I couldn't have kids. His consistency and lack of understanding made me sigh in disbelief. Announcing my pregnancy today had been pre-arranged with Ethan. Moreover, we had taken the initiative to inform the relatives about the harassment I had been receiving from my in-laws and had them on my side. So the relatives already knew about my pregnancy, leaving my in-laws the only ones out of the loop. Ethan had pretended to side with his parents initially, just to provoke them. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you directly. I've been having a lot of morning sickness and couldn't visit much. My in-laws recoiled in surprise. What's this all about? Hey, why are we the only ones who didn't know? That's so rude. This is what happens when you have a forgetful mother. But what caught my attention more than being blamed was my mother-in-law's remark. How do you know mother is forgetful? That's right. Earlier, my mother-in-law had said to me, "You have a forgetful mother." My mom only recently started showing signs of dementia. And I hadn't told anyone but Ethan. It was odd that my mother-in-law knew about it. She shrugged her shoulders for a moment, then defiantly said, "I just thought, considering it's your mom, maybe she's forgetful." But such an excuse doesn't fly with me. I looked at my in-laws and said, "You two scammed my mother, didn't you?" The word scam sent a chill through the room. Looking at them, I could see their faces twitch in panic. What's this all of a sudden? How dare you accuse us of being scammers? Delayed. I thought you lacked common sense, but this is just too much. They seemed to think I was bluffing, trying to maintain their composure. I almost pitied them for not being able to admit their guilt. I have proof. Look, I pulled a piece of paper from my bag. It was a copy of my mother's bank statement. Recently, my mom told me she got a call from an unknown number. I questioned her in detail. Since she's getting forgetful, I was always cautious about someone possibly taking advantage of her. We live far apart, so I don't get many chances to see her. I wanted to help her in any way I could. She told me that someone pretending to be from a credit card company called, demanding payment for an outstanding balance. Taking her stations. My mom, with her diminished judgment, believed she really owed money and transferred a large sum to the account they gave her. And it wasn't just a few $100 or $1,000. It was tens of thousands of dollars. I immediately asked her to send me a copy of the bank statement from that time. When I saw it, I felt dizzy. The payee was clearly listed as Mindy Brown, my mother-in-law's name. But my forgetful mom hadn't realized she was transferring money to her. Brooks, are you still going to deny scamming after seeing this? My mom said the credit card company asked for unpaid charges. But why would the payment go to you? Mindy? That's strange, isn't it? Yet the relatives were all wide-eyed at my words. My in-laws were trembling. It seemed I had hit the mark. They were panicking, being caught in their scam. So what? Your mother was foolish enough to be scammed. You're just one scam, and you're making such a big deal out of it. Even now, they refuse to admit their guilt. As I was about to speak again, Ethan chimed in. It's not just once. Mom, Dad, you've done this scamming multiple times. I checked your phones earlier. There were many calls to numbers not in your contacts. Dozens a day. People don't usually call so many unknown numbers. This is proof you didn't just scam once. And another thing, Ethan continued, I received a bill from an unknown company claiming unpaid charges. Upon checking, I was shocked to discover that I am listed as a co-signer on loans for you. What were you thinking, making your son a co-signer? You must have been indulging in luxury brands and gambling away money. Then, out of desperation, you resorted to scamming. Am I wrong? Ethan's words seemed to hit home as both parents looked guiltily uncomfortable. And Natalie, you mentioned that they called you multiple times, harassing you and demanding you to send money. It was all to pay off their debts, right? Do you realize how much she has suffered because of you? Ethan's voice shook with anger. Tears welled up in my eyes as I remembered all the mistreatment from my in-laws. Just a little more. Soon, I'd have my chance to vent my frustration on them. I bit my lip hard. That's because I wanted to get along with Natalie. My mother-in-law desperately tried to justify. I did errands and shopping for you, saying you had a bad leg. But that was a lie, wasn't it? I was surprised you seemed fine today. My mother-in-law's body twitched again. Ethan, sensing an opportunity for a counterattack, pressed on. I'm fed up with your lies. You've been using and ridiculing Natalie. Enough is enough. We're cutting ties with you. It's too late to apologize now. And we'll be reporting the scam to the police. Ethan, speaking sternly, caused his parents to widen their eyes in shock. This was the first time the usually calm and kind Ethan showed such anger. It must have been the same for his parents. What are you saying about calling the police? Ethan, we're family, aren't we? They desperately clung to Ethan, but he firmly cut them off. No, you're not my family. Not when you hurt the people I care about and commit crimes. His parents seemed to collapse on the spot, but finally left the house under the cold stares of the relatives. They probably won't come back today. Sorry everyone for all this trouble on New Year's Day. Happy New Year, Ethan said cheerfully, and the New Year's celebration began. We decided not to bring out my in-laws again and just enjoy the start of the new year together. As promised, we reported my in-laws to the police, and they were promptly arrested. Their sentencing is yet to be decided. I hope they get the punishment they deserve, including for the harassment they caused me. It turns out their debts amounted to several million yen. Gambling and buying luxury items, they spent money recklessly, so there's no room for sympathy. They had even borrowed money from neighbors who were exasperated when they talked about it. We apologized on behalf of my in-laws and sold their house to pay off the debts. That was the end of our involvement with them. I went on maternity leave and Ethan was transferred. It was a good chance to get away from my in-laws. I was excited to start a new life with our child. A year after the child was born, I heard from relatives about my in-laws. They had been sentenced to 2 years in prison with suspended execution. Suddenly, in their probation period, they lost their house to pay off debts and are living in a hotel, working various part-time jobs. They don't deserve sympathy after deceiving people and taking their money. They should work to the bone to make up for their actions. Hopefully, they'll reflect deeply on their upcoming prison time. Ethan, our child, and I were living happily together. No more calls from my in-laws. We were building a new family, laughing together,